Daddy Pig, Peppa, and George decided to go for a walk by the pond. When they reached the bend, the path to the pond was blocked. A sign read, "Passage closed," but nearby there was another sign pointing toward the forest. Daddy Pig noticed a fallen signpost. He picked it up and said,
"Probably this way."
A narrow trail led into a sparse forest. The further they went, the quieter everything around became. No wind, no birds, only footsteps. Suddenly, a duck appeared. Daddy Pig suggested following her as she might lead them to the pond. Peppa was wary of the duck's behavior. She seemed strange. The duck started moving chaotically, but no one except Peppa paid attention to it. It seemed like they were walking in circles. Same sign, same turn, but not the same place. George looked into a puddle and saw himself, but his reflection was going backwards. Finally, the pond, but it didn't ring with duck calls or splash like usual. It was waiting. The water was smooth, dark, unnaturally black. At first, one duck appeared, then two. Their eyes were red. Suddenly, the ducks grew into huge, toothy monsters and roared wildly as they swallowed George and Daddy Pig. Peppa stepped back, but she lost her footing and disappeared into the darkness of the ominous pond. She was falling, but not downwards, through images like through cracks in glass. Something was waiting for her below. Suddenly, all became normal again, but she didn't say a word. They returned home. Everything looked normal, almost. Peppa was standing at the window. She looked like Peppa, but only on the outside. It all started like any other day. Daddy Pig was fixing a floorboard. Peppa, George, and Evie watched. Evie stared into the gap, silent, unmoving, eyes too wide.
"Don't go down there.
Daddy Pig said.
Just dust and spiders."
That night, Peppa woke up. Strange lights flickered under her door. She heard soft rustling. At the end of the hall, she saw Evie.
"Peppa, we're waiting."
In the living room, the rug was gone. In its place, a gaping hole. She stepped closer. Creak, crack. A hand grabbed her. She was pulled under the floor, into darkness, cold, whispering, laughter. Then a warped version of Evie's song. Peppa trembled. Evie stood before her, but twisted, taller, eyes hollow.
"You came to play."
She whispered. Peppa backed away, touched something. She turned and saw Daddy Pig. His eyes were glowing. She ran. Hands reached out. Faces flickered. Ahead was a light. It was the silhouette of Mummy Pig. She climbed toward the light, and suddenly a white flash. She gasped in bed. In her room, she looked around, panting. Everything looked normal. She exhaled, nervously smiled. But then she looked up. Evie was on the ceiling, smiling. Peppa wakes up in her room. Outside the window, dawn is breaking. Everything is calm. She plays with George while Mom and Dad are busy with their chores. A strange feeling outside the window. Peppa approaches the window. The sky is gray, foggy. The air is cold. She feels a sense of unease, as if something is watching her. Distortion of reality. She washes her face and looks in the mirror. Her face changes, her eyes darken, and her smile becomes sinister. A cold blue light appears in the room, creating a distortion effect. Suddenly, the mirror cracks and shatters. Shards fall to the floor, and a shadow appears in the reflection, quickly disappearing. The room disappears, an entrance to another reality. Suddenly, objects dissolve or vanish. Peppa finds herself in a gray room with no windows or doors. The walls are covered with mysterious symbols and fingerprints. A faint rustling sound can be heard in the air. Whispers of the past, soft voices. Remember, you're not alone here. All memories are part of you. They grow louder, as if someone is whispering right into her ear. Peppa feels a chill down her spine. Shadows appear. George with empty eyes, Mommy Pig with tears on her face, Daddy Pig breathing heavily, his face distorted by fear. They move or stand still, their shadows stretch across the walls, creating a creepy atmosphere. Peppa realizes the room has remembered all of the characters' fears. She searches for runes or symbols on the walls to understand what's happening. Suddenly, snake-like hands or claws start stretching out from the walls, trying to grab her. The characters begin to disappear or transform into terrifying creatures. George screams about a zombie dinosaur with empty black-red eyes. Mommy Pig cries, and her tears turn into drops of black liquid. Daddy Pig breathes heavily and looks very scared. His face is distorted by fear. At this moment, a sinister bunny appears with glowing eyes and an evil smile, watching everything with malice. Peppa decides to break the runes on the walls with a hammer. When she hits them, the walls crack and vibrate. At that moment, a huge monster emerges from the darkness, a creature with long claws, sharp teeth, and burning eyes. It growls and tries to grab her. After destroying the symbols, everything around plunges into darkness. The monster roars and disappears into an abyss. The room completely vanishes. Only emptiness or endless darkness remains. Peppa returns to her room. Everything seems normal again. But inside her remains a feeling of heaviness and fear. She sits by the window of her house with a pensive expression, gazing into the distance, as if she senses something sinister inside herself or nearby. Peppa, Zoe, and Candy stayed overnight at school. Flashlights stood on the desks. The children laughed, playing hide and seek. The lights began to flicker. Chalk writings distorted, letters twisted, crawling by themselves across the board. The laughter faded. Strange voices softly whispered their names. Red eyes flickered on the walls, watching every movement. Peppa felt an icy chill, her heart racing. Suddenly, a silhouette darted behind her. Red eyes stared straight at her. Peppa, Zoe, and Candy rushed into the hallway. The doors slammed shut on their own. The lamps flickered. Shadows from the ceiling and walls slid down, stretching into tentacles. They moved toward the children, intertwining and writhing. The children ran, the echo of their footsteps blending with a faint metallic hum. A silhouette flashed ahead, its eyes glowing red. For a moment, it seemed they had managed to escape it. The children hid behind the tables. The dishes trembled. The space itself seemed to breathe. For a brief moment, they calmed down, catching their breath, thinking the danger had passed. But from the corners, the shadows suddenly came alive, wrapping around Zoe and Candy, seeping into their limbs. Their eyes flared red, their movements turned sharp and unnatural. Peppa screamed as shadows reached for her from every corner. Peppa ran into the assembly hall. The stage was lit by a dim spotlight. Suddenly, the ghost of Madame Gazelle appeared, red eyes, a stretched grin. Zoe and Candy, with monstrous faces and tentacles, moved independently between the rows of chairs, driving Peppa toward the stage. The shadows merged into a dome around Peppa, coiling around her body. She tried to break free, then looked up. Only strange faces stared from the ceiling. The light went out. Darkness swallowed everything. Peppa and George were playing in the park with their toys. Suddenly, they found a strange, dirty Labubu in the bushes. The children decided to take it home, and that was a mistake. Mummy Pig washed the toy and hung it up to dry. That night, when everyone was asleep, Labubu came to life and headed to the parents' bedroom, making eerie sounds. Labubu saw Daddy and Mummy Pig fast asleep and crawled under their bed. Suddenly, Mummy Pig woke up with a dreadful feeling and wanted a drink of water. While standing in the kitchen, she heard rustling sounds in the bedroom and hurried back there. In the room, she saw Daddy Pig, but then the door slammed shut behind her, and the lights went out. From under the bed, Labubu began to crawl out with a terrifying grin. Mummy Pig panicked and tried to open the door, but she couldn't. Peppa woke up from the awful screams and shook George awake to see what was happening. They saw Labubu drag their parents' bodies into the basement and then suddenly glance sharply at them. The children quickly ran upstairs and hid behind the wardrobe. Luckily, Labubu didn't notice them and went into another room. Peppa and George rushed to the basement to rescue their parents, but when they got down there, horror awaited them. It was empty. Suddenly, the basement door slammed shut and the light went out. Peppa remembered there was a ventilation hatch leading to the kitchen. They quickly removed the grate and began crawling up, but Labubu grabbed George's leg and pulled him down. Peppa tried with all her strength to save her brother, but she couldn't, and George was dragged into the darkness. When Peppa made it to the kitchen, she ran to the front door, but it was locked. She turned around and saw Labubu charging at her with a horrifying scream. Peppa woke up in her own bed, confused about what was happening. She slowly went downstairs and saw her whole family standing there, and in Daddy Pig's hand was a present. Peppa realized it had all been a dream and sighed in relief. The family handed her the gift, but when Peppa opened the box, she screamed. Inside was that very same Labubu toy. The family enters a vast Victorian greenhouse. Dozens of pots with exotic plants surround them. In the center rises a wooden sculpture of Labubu holding a flower. A close-up of the wooden Labubu's face. In its bead-like eyes, the shadows of shifting plants are reflected. On the petals of a rare orchid, patterns emerge, resembling grinning Labubu faces. In the heart of the flower, among the stamens, tiny seeds glitter, shaped like miniature Labubus. The leaves on the walls form silhouettes that resemble the family members, but with disproportionately large heads. Drops of condensation slide down the glass ceiling. They merge into patterns that form smiles. The family steps into a closed pavilion. The air is sweet and heavy with the scent of orchids. At the center stands a vase filled with transparent nectar. Inside float tiny Labubus, as if made from candied fruit. All the walls are covered with orchids, their petals resembling Labubu's enormous ears. On a gleaming drop of nectar appears the inverted reflection of the family, and each face bears Labubu's features. The roots of the plants intertwine, weaving a web. Faces take shape within its cells. Sprouts begin to push through the floor. They grow rapidly, transforming into stems with lantern-shaped flowers in the form of Labubu. The pavilion door becomes overgrown with ivy. Its heart-shaped leaves fold into the shapes of eyes. The family finds themselves before an ancient tree. In its trunk gapes a hollow shaped like Labubu's wide smile. Inside the hollow lies a nest of intertwined roots. Within it sits a massive Labubu made of living flowers. Petals fall from the branches, forming portraits of the family on the ground, only with plant-like features. The floral Labubu gazes straight into the camera. In each of her flower eyes is a tiny reflection of the family members. The tree's branches bend, forming an arch that leads into the hollow. Roots rise from the earth, gently wrapping around the family's legs, covering them with blooming patterns. The family transforms into living topiary sculptures in the shape of Labubu. Their faces become perfect floral compositions. The great flower Labubu nods slightly, and the garden freezes in eternal balance.